Welcome to the Dragon's Library, your source for games, movies, shows, and more. Alrighty, everybody, welcome back. Today we are going to be talking about another book again. It's time to start reading. No, but seriously, today we're talking about the Labyrinth of Drakes. So I'm really excited about this book. I had been setting it aside to listen to on an audiobook I got from the library, and I was just like, let's just listen to this, and I loved it so much. So, for those of you who don't know, The Labyrinth of Drakes is part of the Memoir of Lady Trent series. A great book, a great, science fantasy dragon series, because it's heavily into, the study of dragon biology and stuff like that, by Marie Brennan. And if you haven't read the first three books, or, listen to my reviews on them, I highly recommend you do both those things, because, I can always use the traffic. If you just want to hear my opinions on the book beforehand, I can go ahead and just, we're going to have a non-spoiler section, so don't feel bad about that. But, so, for those of you who don't know, the series so far is about Marie Brennan, and she is a dragon naturalist or dragon biologist, and her entire world is almost like a sort of I don't want to say it's a completely unique world because a lot of the countries seem to be heavy stand-ins. There's not one-to-one, but they seem to be a mixture of various cultures. It's clearly the area with the feathered serpents is meant to be a South American kind of continent area. This is she's clearly from a pseudo-British society and stuff like that. So the world is very familiar while also being, different in terms of names and alliances and stuff like that. Which means you don't always know exactly who's who. Cause if it were just a one-to-one, this was just an alternate history thing. We'd have a clear idea of who we should be rooting for and against, we'd have a sort of real-world basis for natural alliances and stuff like that. By distancing the names, I feel like the book gives a lot more mystery, and you start having to think about who's your ally, who's your enemy, what the political situation is, how it's going to affect her research, stuff like that, which is a lot more interesting than just a historical, an alternate history thing, I think. So basically she was a nobleman's daughter. She, was expected to just get married, but instead she wanted to study dragons. Eventually she did marry, but she married this, guy who was also a dragon naturalist of sorts, and he and her went to go on this expedition. Super spoilers for the first book, but, it's just the first book. Well, here's the problem. I want to talk about this book without spoilers, and I said I was going to at the beginning of this, but as I started talking about this, the first three books I could talk about without spoilers for the most part. I really could. But this book is so heavily reliant on the stuff that came before, I'm not sure I can, but I will do my best to talk about it without spoilers. So, ignoring the plot up to this point, basically, they found a way of preserving dragon bone. This is something that's found in the first book, and I'm sorry, that's a little bit of spoiler for that, but I have to do that so you understand. And in the third book, people started weaponizing it, and so they need to start a dragon breeding program. Because their big thing is they want to keep it secret so it wouldn't spread to the other countries, and they wouldn't start hunting down dragons. So now their choices are either synthesize a artificial version of the bone, which they failed doing, but their country is working on, or learn how to breed dragons so that they can raise some in captivity and the natural dragon populations won't be hunted to extinction. And they're basically a race against the clock. The scientist who had originally been working on the project has been, thrown up his arms, said, I can't do it, left, and disavowed himself. And they asked, Lady Trent's partner, Isabella Camhurst is her name, so her partner, or not her husband, but her research partner, what's his name? Tom Wilker, that was his name. So Tom Wilker, and her, was invited to take up the project, and he agreed only if Isabella could. And so they were a little worried, though, that since it was a big noble, and Tom isn't exactly he wasn't exactly noble birth, he got this position because he had a sponsor. That's why he's a scholar, a naturalist, and part of the many societies. Because again, we're very much in Victorian London area, so those societal representations of, Isabella's responsibility. She's considered kind of odd because although she did like great service to the country in the third book, and she's like a, she got like pseudo knighted basically, but she's Dame Isabella now. But even as a result of that, because of her eccentricities, being a woman who became a naturalist, dead husband, a child she doesn't really see much aside from the voyage she went on a few years ago, she's, not exactly looked in the best light, and a lot of the country have like a lot of bad rumors about her. And so the two of them, while heavily respected for their work, aren't exactly respected as like members of society, and the story plays into their roles and how what they want to do and how what they try to do is never enough. How if other people had done half the things they had, they, by their very position, they would find it easier to find sympathetic voices and resources to continue their work. But they still take this offer because even though it looks like they're just looking for a fall guy, so like, if like a year later, they might only get like a year, but a year working on this project could still yield a lot of valuable data, so they go ahead. And there's a lot of, intrigue with kidnappings and poisoning and political maneuvering, and there's the other country that has been hunting dragons for their bones, trying to kill them and sabotage their research or capture them. And also a lot of really interesting things that you learn about dragon biology and the ancient draconian civilization that seems to know something about what they were trying to accomplish. The ancient draconians are sort of like a pseudo ancient Egypt, but they were like a world-spanning empire at one point. And they had apparently, okay, well, I'm not going to tell that because that's spoilers, but they learned some very important things about dragons, and I mean, it's very clear. You learn some really shocking things in the third book. And that's about all I can say on the plot without going into too many spoilers. For those of you who did listen to my third book, though, we do get to see Suhail again. He's the archaeologist who studies the draconian civilization that we met in the third book. He's a really fun character. I really like him. Him and Isabella have a really good dynamic. And it works out very well for them, actually. This whole book does. They kind of get to finally break free of a lot of social conventions that's restrained them near the end. So I like that for them. They're fun. They're fun characters who both don't really like the positions they've been forced in by the nature of their birth. Suhail, due to his responsibilities to his family. Isabella, because she's a woman who wants to pursue a career as a naturalist. I do look forward to seeing what her son Jacob says about this in the end, though, because that's gonna be interesting. I hope we get to see more of him in the fifth book, because we don't really get to see much of him in this book at all, which is kind of disappointing, I gotta say. So, yeah. Alright, that's all I can say without spoilers. Everyone who doesn't want spoilers, go read these books, go listen to them. I guarantee your libraries. Fun fact, most of your libraries probably have an app. EBR does, but I'm not sure about others, but I know a lot of libraries now will have an app, and you can literally just download the audiobooks and listen to them whenever you're, like, not busy or doing something that doesn't require a lot of attention, like driving or something. Just, keep them on in the background, listen, and then come back. Alright? We're all good? Cool. So, after the third book, with the whole, Kylagas, the, airship things, the scouting airships made from dragon bone, because it's lightweight and extremely durable, after the preserving method was leaked, the Scareling government is desperate to build Kylagas on their own, but the dragons they've been able to preserve are, too small. The government also doesn't have any natural dragons in their own territories, and as a result, they've been forced to realize that if they start hunting dragons, eventually they'll become too rare a resource, and they're already behind on building these things anyway, so they'll probably end up with a smaller amount. It's not really out of love for dragons they do it, but, it's good that they're at least thinking about, hey, maybe we shouldn't bleed this resource completely dry. They're not always portrayed in the best light, but, what are you gonna do? So Isabella and Tom get sent over to this new country. I forget Akia. That's the name of it. It's like a desert country. Has some very, Middle Eastern vibes to it, if you get my drift. Which kind of makes sense with the parallel that the ancient Draconians were a very Egyptian parallel society. Like, their big thing was their gods were dragon-headed gods. And they mysteriously disappeared, and they even literally find in the second book what is essentially the Rosetta Stone of the Draconian Empire. They're not all subtle with the fact that this is meant to be like the ancient Egypt stand-in, okay? And so it makes sense that I'd be in that area because Egypt's right over there, so I guess that makes sense. It's still unclear to me if the actual world, because I don't think I've ever seen a map for this, so I'm not sure if the entire world is like the same geography as ours are not. But that would be interesting to find out. I would really like to see a map of this world to determine, like, is this just our world, but dragons create an entirely different history? Because if so, cool on the writer for acknowledging that. Marie Brennan is a really good writer, and she, you know what? People read her stuff. She has even more books after this. Like, she apparently continued the series after these 5 books. And I'm definitely gonna read the sequels. So yeah, this is a really fun series, really fun characters. And we get to find out some really interesting thing about dragons' biology, like how they're affected by the eggs' development is affected by heat. And they eventually find out near the end of the book, like super spoilers for this, that the dragons, adapt to their environments based on like how their eggs are handled and their heat. These mutate and causes mutations in the egg. Now, if they're in the same environment that their parents were in, the mutations will be mostly like minor to non-existent. But when in severely different areas, they will mutate. Now, these mutations usually result in deformities or death, but every dozen or so, you'll get one that survives. And it's sort of like the dragons have their own accelerated evolutionary component. Like they have like a certain emergency evolution that's really, really like, basically if they're in environments where they would usually die, instead of just outright dying, they attempt to adapt to the environment, but they usually die in the eggshell or right after they're born, or they're born with a lot of deformities and die as a result of that. It's really clear that their genes are just super unstable as a result of this, unless they're in the same environments from, laying to hatching. Which is why the dragons are always so careful with how they lay, where they lay, and stuff like that, as Isabella follows them. And it also explains some of the things like how the the mud dragons from that swamp of Moulin had such that weird hatching, which apparently is just a mutation built on the swamps of Moulin. That was the environment, and this is how they adapted over time to live in there. It basically allows dragons to more easily adapt to any surroundings, which I find really interesting. It's a good way to explore why the Draconians dragons aren't around anymore. I'm not sure it entirely holds up as science, but we're already working with dragons, so we're already on a level of fantasy to begin with. So, yeah, it's cool. I do like a lot of things they learn about the Draconian civilization. Just like whenever Suhail and Isabella are the same, like together, it's just so much fun watching them like explore and bounce off each other. And as they, explore this dragon's nest, Isabella will unearth the Draconian relic, and he'll, go take over and start directing their efforts. And I really just love their dynamic. They're two very interesting characters. Suhail obviously has this deep, abiding love for, history, specifically the Draconian civilization. We even find out why, because as a kid, he spent a lot of time with some of the more nomadic tribes of his country, and out there are a lot of Draconian ruins. And so as a kid, he used to explore these ruins and developed a massive fascination. And there's this wonder and awe that Marie Brennan is really able to bring to all the scenes with the Draconian ruins. Because fun fact, the Labyrinth of Drakes, the title location of the book, is this massive location of like canyons and stuff like that that's very susceptible to flooding. And, tons of dragons and predators, very dangerous in the middle of the desert. But it's also home to like one of the world's grandest Draconian ruins. Like it's so much Draconian stuff out there. And as they're exploring it, they really do get the sense of like, yeah, I can understand if I was a kid living out here, I might have, not become a dragon naturalist. I might have become a historian too. And I do love that perspective, because a lot of this series has been about characters who have an intense desire to learn and understand something about a part of either their childhood or an interest they love that they have this spark. They just need to know more. And it's really cool. You got this in the third book too, with Isabelle realizing that her son, unlike her, where she had like found fascination with dragons and all things with wings, her son found a lifelong love of the ocean and ship's life. So like you get to see the spark in every character. Suhail has it, Tom has it, Isabella has it, her son has it, her husband James had it as well. It really is like the central abiding theme of this story is that the pursuit of knowledge, as long as it's something you love, as long as you pursue that which you love, you'll find happiness in life. Even if it's not always obvious at first. Even if it's difficult and there are obstacles, and even if people say no, follow what you believe in. And you know what? I can get behind that message. It's a really good message, really fun story. So yeah. Throughout this, there's some things like Isabel gets kidnapped and dragged through, and there is just a brutal, like, warning for those of you who, like, get about icky with, like, burns and infection, stuff like that, because they go through some brutal stuff when they're kidnapped. They get like dragged through the desert for days. Their like Tom's back gets like blistered to the point where he can barely move by the sun's rays. They get like, just thrown away in a, chained up, tied up the whole time, imprisoned. They even get beaten when they attempt to escape right before they're rescued. Isabella had her feet burned and she can barely stand for most of it. She's trying to be brave. She's trying to hold on for Tom, and Tom's like, look, if we get a chance to escape, you have to run. I'm not going to be able to run. You're going to have to run. There's this horrible moment where he says, look, they're taking us tomorrow. We don't have time. One of us can get away. You can get away. So what I need you to do is I'm going to make a distraction. I need you to run. Do not worry about me. Run. And it's really sad too, because I could totally I've seen them killing him off in that scenario. They didn't hold any punches with James, and I get the feeling that he could have died. You know what? That was genuinely like really impressive of him. And the thing was, he wasn't even asking for Isabella to let him die because he was just being kidnapped. They were clearly handing them over to someone, possibly their enemies. He was going to be a prisoner, but he did not want Isabella to do that. He's like, it's not about you being a woman. It's not about you being weaker. It's about, you're the only one who can run. If I could run, I would hope you would ask this of me. One of us has to get back and warn the others. Maybe you can this is the only way you might be able to save both of us, but at least guarantee, you'll be safe. And he's kind of been her confidant. Like, ever since their sponsor died in the second book and her husband died in the first book, they're the last two members of that fated expedition in the first book where they found out about dragon bone preservation. They're the last two of that historic moment that has since changed the world, and they've been there with each other through all this, trying to find a solution, trying to mitigate the damage, trying to work through it and go on this journey of discovery to avert catastrophe. And it's really touching. Now, granted, they do get saved. Suhail manages to rescue them, partially thanks to Isabella's escape. Even though they get captured and beaten, it was thanks to her escape that they learned which tent they were being held in, so they were able to sneak in at the night and, rescue them. We also get to spend time with Isabella's brother in this book, too. He's a lot of fun. Yeah. He's part of the military now, but he's always like, he seems like the only person aside from Tom, Isabella can just like talk to like a normal person. So their interactions are really cute, especially since he was like one of the only members of their family that actually, believed in her, in her dream. He was very supportive, always sneaking books and things she wasn't allowed to have because, he was okay for him to grab those things. He would always let her borrow them. So that's my opinion on the book. Really good, nice twists, good scenes, intense drama sometimes. The stuff with like the assassins and the kidnappers were really fun. The revelation at the end of the book where they discover the ruin is fantastic. Descriptions of the ruins in general were just really good work. I loved it. And the dragon biology stuff was always really interesting. Like, there's always a part of me in all these books. It's like, okay, I get it. It's this very touching human drama. Like, can we get back to the dragons for a second? And then every once in a while, Isabella will be like, oh, they keep talking about politics. I wish we could just get back to the dragons. I'm like, oh, thank goodness. A character who understands my perspective. I really do feel like half the time when she's like, I wish I could just study dragons already. I'm like, I wish you could do that too. But we have to deal with this, unfortunately. So yeah, highly recommend this series. It's getting better and better with every book. Seriously, I think if you can get through the first book, they're just getting better and better. I don't know how she does it, but, Marie Brennan is great. Cannot recommend enough. So, yeah. I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode, and thank you for listening to the Dragon's Library. Please, subscribe to this podcast to be notified of new episodes. The Dragon's Library releases new episodes Tuesday and Friday each week, and you can follow us on Twitter at dragon_library2. If you want to suggest an episode topic, my email is in the description below. And as always, thank you so much for all your support.